I knew nothing about shipping. I knew nothing about what I was about to set myself into, but I haven't looked back since. If a vessel's sitting still or a container sitting still, it's not making anyone any money.
Yeah, just crazy how that one little stretch of water through the canal can just absolutely slow down global trade.
One little thing in one side of the world can actually impact something else on the other side of the world. The people that were holding on to a lot more stock during COVID were the ones that were king. Just in time is probably not as appealing as what it was. The pendulum always swings. Relationships is certainly what drives this industry. The industry's hard, but it's so rewarding. I think growing is uncomfortable and we can do hard things.
Amanda Bradfield, welcome to the Forward Thinking podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you joining, and you're the head of international freight at FTA. So, which is, I guess, a fairly recent role from what I understand, just under a year or so after being with a company for a really long time. So it would be great, I guess, to kick off to understand a little bit more about you and your background and like how you came to work in logistics.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for inviting me again. I stumbled into logistics like a lot of us did back in the late 90s. I'm definitely showing my age there. So I was 15, 16. I was out of school. I was working at a bakery called Brumby's Bakery.
I know Brumby's.
I was there as
Yeah.
You know Brumby's? There you go. Not many of them are around here in WA anymore, but Brumby's Bakery was where I started out just, doing part-time work there, and actually was assistant manager when I was just out of school. But I hurt my knee and I couldn't stand up for very long anymore. So I unfortunately had to leave. Went to a place where they taught you how to type and answer phones and stuff. I'm not really too sure what they called it back then. And then I got a call to be asked if I wanted to come for an interview. And I was like, sure. I went to an interview, and that afternoon I got the job at a freight forwarding company, a local freight forwarding company here in WA in Fremantle. I knew nothing about shipping. I knew nothing about what I was about to set myself into, but I haven't looked back since. So I was 17 years old when I started out in shipping. Yeah, that's right. So I've been around Fremantle all my life, but to be honest with you, much like anybody, didn't know anything about shipping, didn't know how much of a big part shipping plays in everyone's lives. But I certainly do know quite a bit about it now, I think. But there's still so much to learn.
Absolutely. Wow. So you started super early. And was your role there, I would presume you probably had a few different roles over that time, but was it more kind of on the operations or more account management, or what was your sort of role?
So it's usually with freight forwarding, and I know that if any of the freight forwarders are watching this, they'd nod their heads, but you started out with freight forwarding as being the runner, and it was one of the best jobs in the industry. They don't really have them so much anymore now that we've gone pretty much electronic for most things, but the runner was responsible for taking documentation to shipping lines or to transport companies or going to customs house and getting different stamps put on different documents. And that was your job. Your job was just driving around, talking to people and picking up and dropping off documents. Nice. It was the best.
Oh, how good.
And back then, Sam, I mean, you probably don't know this. Back then, there was no mobile phones. That was a big thing. So if the company I was working for wanted to get a hold of me, they just have to ring around to the places that I was supposed to be going to and ask if I'd been in yet. And that's how we worked. And it was the best. No one could get in contact with you, and you just went around and spoke to people. And it was a lot more face-to-face connections than what there is obviously now in the industry. Everything's gone electronic, which is a good thing, but it's also one of the downsides now.
It's taken out a bit of that human element, right? Everything's digitized and online. And fairly recently, you could say, under a year or so, you joined FTA. So tell us about your role. Like, what are you actually responsible for, and what do you do over at FTA?
Yeah, about 28 years in that one company. And I thought, to be honest with you, that's might be just a bit time for a change. Obviously, I'd been doing a lot of different things, I guess, on LinkedIn. You probably, you might have seen some of my posts, Sam.
I see them all the time. They're great. We'll get into that. Don't worry.
And obviously, I really do enjoy the writing side of things. So I thought it might be time to try something new. And FTA, had this role that I thought might be a good place to start for sure. So head of international freight and logistics, it is a mouthful, but it just basically means that I'm doing the shipping report. Now we're doing shipping report webinars. Myself and Tom Jensen are doing that. We're doing a lot of support for the industry as well, whether it be problems with ABF, so Border Force, or with DAF, so Department of Agriculture. and also any liner problems and whatnot, terminal issues. We're the ones that are they're pushing the notices out and making sure the industry is well aware of what's going
Yeah.
on out there.
Okay, nice. Your LinkedIn posts, I really like them. Like I see them almost pretty much every day. Like, have you done copywriting? You must have done something along those lines.
No, no. But the reason why I laugh is I once had someone say to me, about 6 months ago, "Oh, I haven't seen your stuff on LinkedIn lately." And I looked at her, I was like, "Are you joking?" And she was like, "No." And I'm like, "Must
Yeah.
be
No, I
blind."
definitely see it.
Yeah, no, look, it's information sharing for me has always been something I really enjoy. And a lot of the stuff that I share on LinkedIn, a lot of the things I talk about are things that I find personally interesting. So after being in the industry for so long, every day still surprises me. And I know that a lot of people will say the same thing, that this industry, there's no day that's ever the same. And there's so much that goes on there's so much content on the end to end side of things. It's not just the blue water shipping, it's the land side, it's the air freight, it's all the things, the geopolitical issues that are going on in the world. That's certainly keeping everyone
Yeah.
going. You could probably start a whole another LinkedIn
Yeah.
page about that. But there is so much there. There's so much going on with it. But yeah, just information sharing and making sure that people know what's
Yeah.
going on. I think it's fun. I
Good.
enjoy it. I call it my side hustle that makes me absolutely
Yeah,
no
no,
money.
I know the feeling, don't worry. That's great. You mentioned obviously there's a lot of like shipping, especially is so dynamic. There's a lot of things at play in the global trade market. What are you seeing at the moment, just in terms of overall landscape?
Oh, look, I think that everyone's looking at vertical integration and how shipping lines are pivoting a little bit themselves. I guess the blue water's there, and they've definitely conquered that. And there's money to be made on the end-to-end side of things. So, the terminals, taking over some terminals, different arms of their business is something we're certainly seeing. And obviously, we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions that's been happening over the last couple of years. I guess that the traditional ways that people were making money is not making as much money anymore, and it's time for a lot of companies to pivot and to look at different markets and different ways. But that's what we're seeing at the moment. I mean, since COVID, we've definitely seen the landscape changing, that's for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean that's probably a good segue. What, in your view, has really changed in terms of that shipping side since COVID?
It's funny, but anyone that was around during COVID knows how bad it was. I mean, as an industry, we do tend to get on with things pretty well, but I know that there was a lot of people that held a lot of scars from what happened during COVID. Obviously, the volumes went through the roof. There was not a lot of space to be had. Equipment was displaced everywhere due to lockdowns and whatnot. But since then, we have seen things have settled down, right? So the rise and falls are probably not as intense as what we used to see. Now we sort of tend to see the traditional peak seasons coming into play, and I do find that there's probably not so much of an appeal for just in time. So we've got a couple of different ways that people will purchase goods and hold goods, and there's just in time, which means that they'll purchase them and get them shipped as when they need them, or just in case, which means that they're holding on to a lot more stock. And certainly the people that were holding on to a lot more stock during COVID were the ones that were king, right? So everything went through the roof. No one had any stock, but if you did have stock, you'd be charging a good price for that stock. So now we kind of see that just in time is probably not as appealing as what it was. People are starting to see that sometimes the lag time for the supply chain does tend to increase, and especially during those peak seasons when we do have issues with terminals and ports and whatnot. But yeah, I think that people are tending to hold a lot more inventory than pre-COVID, which, land side causes a few more issues with warehousing and whatnot. But the bottlenecks appear somewhere, Sam. So pulling from one and pushing
Yeah,
from the other.
yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of sea freight and shipping, obviously, working on the other side, being a freight forwarder, you're kind of dealing typically with air freight and sea freight. But as an importer or an exporter, how do they decide between ocean freight and air freight? Like, is it just cost? Is it speed to market? Is it everything? How do they normally decide?
Yeah, it's usually that. I mean, it would definitely be the trade-off between the two things. How fast do you want it? How cheap do you want it? How quick do you want to go to market? Is it perishable? Obviously, that's you want to get it out as quickly as possible to make sure it's as fresh as possible, and it's volume as well, right? So the higher the volume for air freight, obviously, the more it's going to cost you. There's some things that can't travel via air freight, obviously things that can't fit in an aircraft, which is understandable. It depends on the commodity that you're shipping. I think at the end of the day, if you've got t-shirts and you're selling, quick to market stuff, then you might air freight in a bit of some of the stock and then sea freight the rest. But it just honestly just depends on the volume. It's per volume,
Yeah.
that one. But definitely is a trade-off between speed
Yeah,
and
yeah,
price.
absolutely. And I know you mentioned earlier there's been like a fair bit of consolidation in the market, not only on the freight forwarding side, but the shipping side as well. Do you see that more and more of that? If you had a crystal ball this year and heading into next year, or do you think there's the market just keeps consolidating and smaller players?
I think the shipping lines are very clever in what they do, and I don't think there's any disputing that. I think that there's a lot of vessel sharing agreements that go on, but there's also shipping lines that do want to be more of a standalone, like your MSCs. They certainly are making sure that they've got enough vessels to run these standalone services. So any time that there is a vessel sharing agreement between lines, they're obviously left open to the other line wanting to do different things with their vessels. They had different agreements in place, of course. But we are seeing it more and more because it spreads the cost, right? So if you're operating a service to Singapore, to and from Singapore, let's say to Fremantle, and it's just your ship, you've got 100% of the costs. But if you're sharing that with another shipping line, of course, you're sharing the costs as well, and you're sharing the risk overall because, whilst things look good this month, maybe next month, that the volumes might be down and you'll be suffering a little bit with less volume, so less revenue.
Yeah, that's interesting. In your experience, like the relationship with freight forwarders and shippers, and there'll be probably people that are new to the industry or thinking about coming into the industry who don't quite know how it works. And, I'm probably included there as well in some aspects. But how would you kind of explain that relationship with a freight forwarder and then with a shipping line, for example?
Forwarders and shipping lines have a symbiotic relationship, I do believe. If you ask the shipping lines, that they need the forwarders, but then forwarders also need the shipping lines, I guess, at the end of the day as well. Forwarders sit in the middle, right? So forwarders, the people that coordinate everything between the buyers and the sellers. The shipping lines are the ones that generally just operate the blue water, so operate the ocean side of things, ocean freight side of things. The relationship between shipping lines and freight forwarders changes depending on the market. So, most forwarders will laugh at what happened during COVID. Of course, the shipping lines were full. They had no space to give. Therefore, the relationships between shipping lines and freight forwarders kind of suffered a little bit. But if the pendulum always swings. So anytime you have a market like this, the pendulum will always swing back to the forwarders then getting knocked on the door from the shipping line asking for more cargo. So it's important, I think, in most businesses, and especially this one, to make sure that you never burn your bridges, right? So the pendulum will always swing back, whether the shipping lines like it or the forwarders like it, it's always going to swing. So I think that, relationships is certainly what drives this
Yeah,
industry.
yeah, yeah. It's all
Yep.
it's all relationship. Are you seeing much push in terms of the shipping side? Because I guess they're under some sort of pressure, right, in terms of going green and carbon neutral and things like that. Are you seeing much
Mm.
activity on that side, or is it still quite a while away before we actually see any real change?
Look, we're seeing bits and pieces. Certainly, there is a drive to change. The International Maritime Organization has certainly got some different things going on there. It's the problem of where do you start and how long it's going to take. So there's definitely change going on. It's just slow, and it's always going to be slow. The scale is such a large scale. We're seeing a lot of low sulfur fuel vessels coming in, biofuels, LNG. But of course, the routes in which vessels take will restrict what fuels they can use because not everywhere has that fuel available, and bunkerage side of things. We're seeing a lot of vessels that are of the older style having scrubbers that removes like the harmful pollutants from the engine's exhaust. And we're also seeing some really cool windshields at the front of vessels. They're used to cut drag, which is really cool. And we do see quite a bit of slow steaming now by the vessels or an eco speed. So that obviously the slower the speed that they take, the less emissions they're creating. It does obviously mean that usually they'll have to put more vessels onto that particular route just to make sure that they're making up for the fact that their vessels are going a little bit slower, but definitely still better for the environment.
I think I saw a post recently of yours, maybe in the last couple of days. Did I see that the Suez Canal is sort of slowly coming back on? Was it Maersk that are sort of starting to use it again?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Maersk have dipped their toes in a few times. They've done a couple of trial voyages through there. The Suez Canal Authority have been very open and honest and have, calling for shipping lines to come back. It's safe to come back now, but understandably, shipping lines are reluctant to come back into play. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. There's insurance issues and safety of crew, which is, should be top of their priority list. But yeah, Suez Canal Authority and Maersk, they've come out and they've gone, Maersk have actually switched one of their services now to fully go through the Suez Canal, which is good news. We are seeing that CMA have dipped their toes in a few times, and I do believe one of the Maersk and Hapag services that they run together will also be doing the same. But it's slow, right? And it's understandably slow. There's nothing to rush on. I think that the industry, of course, adapted to the longer transit times that was via the Cape of Good Hope that the shipping lines had to end up taking. And we've certainly adapted to that. And vessels around the world, we've got a surplus of vessels around the world. And I think that the concern is that once the Suez Canal does actually open, and it doesn't take that long to get from A to B anymore, that we're going to have a surplus of vessels, and certainly a surplus of older vessels in play out there in the fleets of the world. Yeah. So it's good news for the industry, good news overall. Let's fingers crossed. I think,
Fingers
like you said,
crossed.
everyone's cautiously optimistic. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
definitely.
good way to put it. And in terms of, I guess, like on the congestion side, port congestion, again, probably more relevant maybe for newer people or people just sort of starting out in the industry, but blank sailings and congestion at port, what does that actually look like? And are there any consequences, for example, if there are delays, and who is responsible, I guess, overall? Because I would imagine that people are probably shifting the blame at each other a lot of the time on these things. But is there anyone that kind of ultimately takes the blame for these things? Or
No one takes the blame for much there, Sam. They all duck and weave, which is understandable.
yeah,
Port congestion is literally that. So it's congestion at a port. So any time vessels are going to go to a port, they usually have what they call a window. So they have a window that they're supposed to arrive in. If due to bad weather or delays at a previous port, if they can't make it, then sometimes that window's gone and they have to sit out, usually at anchorage outside of the port, and wait for the next turn. If that happens to one, two, three, four vessels, they all just sit there and wait. So during the height of COVID, I think it was over 100 vessels were waiting off the coast of LA and Long Beach. Literally, they had an order of how it was, and maybe we can pull up some of the pictures for you one day of the vessels that were sitting there, all the docks that were sitting all around, and it was just an amazing flotilla of vessels just waiting, just literally waiting. But anyone would say in the supply chain, if you're sitting still, if a vessel's sitting still or a container sitting still, it's not making anyone any money, right?
yeah,
So these vessels and these containers have to keep moving in order to make money. That's port congestion. So who's to blame? There's no one's ever going to cop that, right? The cost of a vessel sitting at sea waiting for a terminal is the cost of the vessel operator. The terminal is not on there because something probably happened before that. It's just the way it is. It's just the way that the industry works. Blank sailings is something a bit different. No, so blank sailings is something that shipping lines will use. It's a part of their playbook, I guess you could say, in a lot of ways. If their vessels are not full and they were due to sail on a certain date and the vessel's, half full, they will blank that sailing and they will wait for the next sailing so they've got more cargo, which is, to sail a vessel half full is exactly the same to send it full. And it's different revenue though, right? So it's the same cost for them. And of course, why would you want to send a ship that's half empty or half full when you can just wait another week? It does cause havoc though, of course, with people's scheduling. So some people will schedule containers to leave a week apart just to make sure that they land at the port of destination in a timely manner. And of course, anything that happens on the blank sailing side of things tends to throw a bit of a spanner in the works.
yeah.
Blank sailings aren't generally announced. They are announced during times of like Chinese New Year's coming up. It's due to come up next, I don't know when this is going to air, but next month, a couple of weeks. Yep. So February 19th or 17th, I think it is Chinese New Year. And it's certainly a date in the calendar that most freight forwarders and shipping lines look to because we kind of usually go, after Christmas, we should have good volumes until Chinese New Year. And that seems to be the pivot point for things to go a bit slow, so the slowdown to happen. So that's when the blank sailings come into play. And of course, understandably, if people are on Chinese New Year and there's not as much volume moving, they will just sail the week after. They will start to announce these blanks. That's what a blank sailing is. Yeah, overall. Consequences for delays, obviously, if you've got contracts, if you're trying to build something, if you're trying to bring something in on this certain date and you don't get it here in time, of course, there can be penalties for that. And I guess along the way, like I said, about the vessels and the windows, There is obviously that as well if they miss a window. Yeah, lots of things going on.
Yeah, it's so many moving parts. And with Chinese New Year, do you see, obviously it slows down during that period, but is it normally kind of a week or two slowdown and then things start to kind of resume? Or is it a bit, how long would you say normally is that slowdown?
Yeah, so sometimes during Chinese New Year, they go, people, the suppliers, so the factories will go away for maybe 1 to 2 weeks. That's generally a time in China for them to travel home and go and see their family. They come back. Obviously, it takes a while for things to start picking up again and start to manufacture. Sometimes we see delays of like 2 to 3 weeks, just depending on the commodity. But generally speaking, about 3 weeks afterwards, you start to see that demand pick up. But it also depends on the year. So if people aren't buying a lot, obviously there's not a lot of purchasing going on. There'd be less volume, or they're holding stock. They haven't sold as much. It also depends on that as well. It's the rise and fall of that. Lots of things to consider.
And especially with shipping, because there's so many different stories, right? Of like whether it's, a ship is under attack from the Houthi rebels, or whether it's, there's issues on board or a fire, or there are like so many different things that I see constantly. Has there been anything to you that has really stood out as just like absolutely, I don't know, like something crazy, like a crazy story that you've seen? Something like in the news, it's like, wow.
You know me, Sam. I do like to follow the shipping news in that side of things. Look, I think that given the scale of global trade, the number of incidences do seem to be increasing, right? But I can't seem to tell whether that is actually increasing or whether we're just hearing about them much quicker, right? So something that happens in some weird port on the other side of the world, we're hearing about that. So I think it's also part of the fact that everything's so instantaneous. Look, Ever Given, you probably remember the Ever Given that got stuck in the Suez Canal. People had a field day with the memes for that one. I think that was, I was going to say, not a good incident. It caused a lot of delays and a lot of issues globally, not just here in Australia. It caused issues globally. But on the flip side, I guess there was, we saw the devastation from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse when the Dali hit that bridge, and we all probably all pretty much real time coming down. So I guess that the two sides to that, no one was hurt in the Ever Given. Obviously, there was multiple casualties for the Dali incident.
Yeah.
Those are probably the two that stand out in the last couple of years for me. Like I said, the Ever Given was a bit more lighter. The issues with the Francis Scott Key Bridge is obviously a lot heavier with the toll there. And of course, the multiple investigations that have gone on since then, we're still continuing to keep that into the media, not only just the shipping media, but also the mainstream media, which doesn't always pick up the incidences that go on in global shipping.
Yeah, it's just crazy how that one little stretch of water through the canal can just absolutely slow down global trade. Like it completely slow it down, right? Very
Yeah, that's
dependable.
exactly right. And I mean, it's a critical waterway, and we found that once that vessels started to go through it afterwards, then the vessels were arriving in Singapore one after the other, which meant that Singapore became congested, and which meant that other vessels couldn't arrive because they couldn't clear the backlog that quickly. So it shows that one little thing in one side of the world can actually impact something else on the other side of the world. It's all interconnected. Not everything we do in global trade is interconnected.
Do you have a favorite port?
I do have Fremantle is definitely my favourite port. I tend to ask people, Sam, there's terms that we use in shipping, and shipping is a completely other language. But for those of you that know Incoterms, right? So Incoterms is what's used for global trade, for purchasing and whatnot. I always ask people what their favourite Incoterm is. Seems to be quite the icebreaker.
Yeah, nice. Oh, very good. And new people coming in, like, because that's the big thing for us, right? Is like we're really, as much as we can, trying to really sell the industry, the broader logistics and freight industry, as a career path for people to, whether it's out of school or university, because it's one of those industries. It's not really talked about like some of the other common industries. Would you have any advice
It's not
for?
very sexy,
It's
Sam,
not. Yeah, it's not. But that's for me. That's where the opportunity is.
but it is.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the opportunity, and it's these particular industries which it's not going to go away anytime soon, right? AI is really only going to help aspects of it. It's not, touch wood, it's not going to take our jobs anytime soon. But it is sexy in its own way. But have you got any advice that or any tips for new people that are thinking about this as a career path, or wondering, about finishing uni or finishing school and kind of wondering, because a lot of people, I think younger people, when they think of logistics, they think of like stacking shelves in a warehouse, which is a small part of it, or a truck driver, which is a small part of it, but it's huge, right? Just wondering if you would have any advice for new people that are coming into this industry.
I try and spruik the industry as much as I can without being annoying. I think that's the people within the industry. I think have to spread those positives about the industry. The industry is hard, right? And anyone working in freight logistics will tell you it's hard, but it's so rewarding and it's so interesting. And as you say, it's not going away anytime soon. So during COVID, we were essential workers. We personally travelled to work with a letter to say that we were essential workers. So in that space, I kind of like to think that we were the ones that kept everything going. I think for new people coming in, I think they need to understand that there is so many different facets to the whole shipping industry. So it's not just the shipping, it's not just the blue water, it's not just warehousing. There's accounts, there's sales, there's social media, there's all these different parts that go into one company that I think that a lot of people do forget about that. I think they need to be curious, right? So anyone coming into this industry should be curious. You can't just sit in your own lane. You've got to look at the whole picture. And I think listening and asking questions is always something that people should do in any industry, but especially this one because it is so interesting. It is so dynamic and it is so fast paced. Frustrating at times, but again, I think that that's what most people that want to do problem solving in some ways make a really good freight forwarder. Yeah,
Oh yeah. If you
yeah.
don't want any two
I
days
think
to be the same.
exactly. So my advice would be do it. It's a great
Yes,
industry to be in.
I agree. Totally.
Definitely. No 2 days are ever the same.
No, absolutely not. Which is great. The days go quick, they're interesting, challenging, frustrating, all of the above, but it's fun. If you weren't in freight and logistics, what career path do you think, have you ever thought about like what you would have done if you didn't end up in
All
logistics?
the time. Every other day, Sam. I did want to be an air hostess back in the day. I'm not tall enough to be an air hostess, which is unfortunate for me. Now I also have a bit of a fear of flying, which also, probably hampered that a bit. No, it doesn't really help. Hotel industry. So back in high school, I actually did some work experience at a local hotel here in Perth, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed that aspect of greeting people and talking to people. I like to talk, Sam, so that certainly I thought that would actually be pretty cool. Working at a hotel, and I always enjoyed the way that hotels run. I think that sort of
Mm,
always made me kind of think about how all the back end stuff works in a hotel. Everything happens so silently behind doors, but you never see it, but it's happening in the background, which is, yeah, I always thought that was pretty cool. So, yep, air hostess or somewhere in the hotel industry.
yeah, no, very good. And I guess finally, just to sort of, yeah, conclude, get to the end, bit of a big philosophical question, but what piece of advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you were to start again?
I think a lot of us don't believe in ourselves, right? A lot of us doubt ourselves. I think we never really think that we can do things that we can. We can do hard things. We can try new things too. So, like we touched on earlier, I was at a job for 28 years. It was comfortable. It was familiar. But should I probably push myself out of my comfort zone? Quite possibly, to try new things. And I think that's what helps us grow. It's uncomfortable though, right? So I think growing is uncomfortable. I think it has to be uncomfortable to be able to grow and stretch. But I think sometimes I just don't think we believe in ourselves. Yeah.
I think when you're 18, most people have no idea what they want to do. And a lot of the time, the default is go to university, do a degree, and then end up in a job that has nothing to do with the degree that you've done. And there's merits to doing that and getting a degree and the experience that comes with that. But I think that you just need to try different things and figure out what you actually enjoy doing, especially when you're so young, because it's one of those things where I had no idea. When I was 18, I thought I wanted to be a mechanic. And I was a mechanic apprentice for about 6 weeks and realized I don't love changing oil on cars. I like nice cars, right? I don't like buying lunch
It's
for the
completely different.
yeah, I don't like buying lunch for everyone else there and basically just, working 12-hour days and 6 days. Like it just wasn't for me. So you just try different things, see what you like. But I think whatever you do, you got to give it your all. I think that's a big thing as well. Like don't half-ass anything, just give it all and find out what you like and what works. But easier said than done. When you're 18, you're thinking about, I know I was thinking about different things. Yeah.
I bet you were, Sam. We won't go there. But I think you're right. I think that the high schools definitely push going into university, right? So my daughter is 17, so she'll be in year 12 this year, and she doesn't want to go to university. And I'm okay with that. I never went to university. Like I said before, I started in this industry when I was 17 with I left school at the end of year 10, which certainly might explain a few things. But again, it's one of those things where you go, well, hang on, I went to the end of year 10, I went straight into a job, I'm doing all right. You know what I mean? There's no, at the end of the day, like you say, a lot of the people I know that went to university and spent 4 years doing something, paying all those HEX fees and whatnot, are now certainly unhappy and making less money or doing something they don't like, and it has nothing to do with what they studied in university. So I think that, you bypass that bit and just go straight to, like you say, trying something new and doing something that you love doing.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky for me in a weird way, probably like you, Sam, and I think that really shows in what you do as well. You enjoy what you do. And I think that if you do enjoy what you do, then it really makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. It is that old cliche, right? If you enjoy what you do, it doesn't feel like work, but it's really true. Like it just doesn't actually feel like work. It's just fun and it kind of just becomes what you do and who you are.
Yeah. But you end up living and breathing it in some ways, don't
Oh
you?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, never switch off, right? But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining and like sharing your insights. Like I said, especially I just wanted to get your view on the shipping side because it's a really big and important part of freight, but and an area that I still don't know too much about. So it was really interesting to learn and yeah, hear your thoughts and I will keep updated on LinkedIn, and I think everyone else should follow you on LinkedIn because your posts are really insightful. Like they're super interesting. So keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time again.